Hi guys, welcome back to Herbhome. One of the things I get asked about a lot is why I'm not down at farmer's market with my uh, sourdough breads. People keep asking me for them, and I'm taking this year off. I'm still baking at home. I've got a beautiful sourdough going. I call the starter Matilda. She's pretty explosive. She's very healthy right now. And I'm keeping my hand in. I've still got all my equipment and everything, but I'm not going to do market until next year. At least I don't think so. My goal is to get things back together here and then come to market without having to worry about, well, is this done at home? Is this done at home? Is this done at home? I can go back down and enjoy visiting with everybody and sharing the good stuff that we make here at Herbhome. And the thing is, being a homestead, we've got our hands in a lot of different things. We do our soaps, we have sourdough, we have fresh herbs, we have herb plants. I do a lot of sewing projects, crochet, just a lot of different things going on. But sourdough's a big one. I love making bread. I've made bread since I was a little bitty kid. And I got into sourdough some years back, but it goes back even further than that. Dad had a big flock of sheep out in California on our ranch. And when the sheep went up to the summer pastures in the hills, we'd go up and visit with our shepherd. He had beautiful working dogs. That's where my love of border collies came from. And, to make bread, he'd pull out this small crock with a beeswax cover over it and make his bread, and then he put the crock back in his bed. And being, probably 7 or 8, I asked him, how come you sleep with that stuff? It was nasty. And he said, that's the staff of life. And he says, I have to keep it warm so it doesn't die. And I thought about that. I thought about it over and over, and then sourdough became very popular. And I got to thinking, well, maybe I can do that, make a sourdough that is that healthy and lives that long, and is that available to us, And, I've followed all these elaborate methods that are out there and everything, and went back to the one that I learned, And then surprisingly, I started watching a baker out west on a YouTube thing called Proof Bread, and he breaks it down simply and easily, like I learned, and he talks about the whys things happen and so on, which really makes it very understandable. If you're wanting to learn sourdough bakery, I really suggest going to the Proof Bread channel and start with his earlier videos. Some of them are just so simple and so basic. Everything he does, he talks about the why of it. And I've got so much admiration for that young man, because they started out in a garage. They began their bread baking business in a garage, but he's got so much love of it and such a broad knowledge of baking. He knows the grains. He's sourcing from local growers for his heritage grains. I mean, I'm hoping for sourdough to be a healthy thing again, not just something that's a fad. I think our country tends to follow fads, like for maybe 5, 6, 7 years, something will be in fashion, and then it'll lose it'll come out of fashion again. And, like my herbs, country folks have always done the herbs. We've always foraged and everything. And then suddenly herbs became popular in the early 70s. And, we decimated a lot of populations out in the woods. The National Forest put a moratorium on, for instance, ginseng and golden seal. And I think it's off now. I'd have to check and be sure. I think responsible foraging is a big issue. But anyhow, things go in fads. But the thing is, maybe a fad can teach you something that will stick with you for the rest of your life. Sourdough will be with me until I turn up my toes. Matter of fact, I may drop a little skin sample in the sourdough to keep it going, But it's, sourdough is a great thing for us. If it's allowed to ferment long enough, if your breads go through a cold proof, then there's going to be the gluten has developed already. and it's processing on out. You know, the structure's there, and then it's processing on out. And the gluten is, you're not as at high risk for gluten issues if you allow your sourdough to cold process, to cold ferment. And that's just a matter of putting it in the refrigerator at the right time in the cycle. I'm not going to get into that today, but there's a right time to put your proof into the refrigerator. And that just takes practice to recognize it, see what the symptoms are, recognize it, put it in there, and know your timing. It's all about timing. I guess it's not about watching the timer. It's about knowing your bread, having a feel for it. I don't know how I got off into sourdough, but anyhow, have a good one, kids. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.